David is not only in big trouble, he's probably guilty if all of the information in this new document prosecutors in the case have filed proves to be true. But there are things under the surface that may complicate this. First of all, it is highly unusual for prosecutors to present any document like this. This honestly is weird to have a prosecution preliminary hearing brief. You almost never see anything like that. And the reason is they're going to have a preliminary hearing, and you don't have to present a brief saying, here's what we're going to show. You just have the preliminary hearing and you show it. So then the question, why did the prosecutor in this case do something that is really not just out of the ordinary, but is extraordinary? It is weird. Why would they do that? There are some cynics who think they did it to dirty David up. And that was the point of this whole thing, that they wanted to show that he was guilty and possibly impact the jury pool. Now, that's the cynical version of this. There is another version, which is that it kind of greases the wheels so that when the preliminary hearing happens, there's momentum to get what the prosecution needs, which is the judge to say, this case is going to trial. So that's one thing. The second thing is that this is a circumstantial case. There is a lot of damning evidence in this prosecution's brief. I mean, from calling an Uber to pick up Celeste to having her come to the house and then texting a half hour later, where are you? That's odd. But then, to buy chainsaws and buy a shovel and all the other things right after she disappears, it is damning. But what you don't have is him committing murder. The prosecution is saying she went in the house and she didn't come out. Now, it's interesting, they say, that he stabbed her twice and then watched her bleed out. How do they know that he watched her bleed out? Because there's no evidence of any eyewitness. So that's kind of odd right there. So this is a circumstantial case. Nevertheless, there is a lot of incriminating evidence. Again, if you believe what the prosecution is saying in this brief, if all of these things become true. Here's the danger in what the prosecution is doing, that they have outlined from soup to nuts, here's what David did. And it is a strong, strong brief that has really shaken people when you read it. It's gruesome, it's detailed, and it's damning. Now, here's the problem. If the defense is able to start poking holes in those things, and the defense says they're going to do it because they say they have proof he's not guilty of murder, that if they start poking holes, then those holes magnify because everybody is so conditioned to believing that this is an open and shut case that all of a sudden every little hole becomes a bigger hole than it would otherwise have been because people are thinking, slam dunk, he's guilty. And then all of a sudden you have to deal with holes. And here's the reality. There is a hole in every case. There's no such thing as a case that is absolutely airtight. There are always holes in cases, from the way police conduct the crime scene investigation to the way the coroner handles things. And as long as we're mentioning the coroner, that, I think, is going to become the centerpiece of the case. Because if you notice, the coroner has said this is a probable homicide, but that doesn't mean homicide. And the word probable is problematic because all the defense has to do is create reasonable doubt. And if they create a doubt as to whether this was even a homicide, that could bode well for David. And then the question becomes, why did it take the coroner months to come up with cause of death? Why were we told a couple of months in, after her body was found, that they may never be able to determine cause of death because the body was so badly decomposed and dismembered. So what allowed them to suddenly reach a conclusion that's not definitive homicide, but is more probable homicide? That's going to be a centerpiece of the defense's case and could play well with the jury. So, way too early to know. By the way, there may not even be a preliminary hearing. I know it's scheduled for next month, but the DA still has the power to go to a grand jury and say, indict him, and if they indict him, there's no preliminary hearing. That also may be a reason why the prosecution presented this brief for a preliminary hearing, because they're able to get the case out to the public, knowing, perhaps, that they're going to go to a grand jury, so there'll never be a preliminary hearing, so at least it's out there in the public. So a lot is still up in the air. Stay tuned.